told about a baby eagle. Now this eagle fell out of its nest. It didn't get it hurt, and it landed in the yard of a chicken coop. And it couldn't fly back up because it didn't have wings enough, to fly. It was like you guys trying to fly. So he looked around and he said, huh. And he began to peck at the corn on the ground, and he began to scratch like the chickens. And as he grew, he decided he was a chicken. Well, it was an unusual thing because normally eagles don't think they're chickens. And so a local paper wrote a story about it. A naturalist saw the story and decided that he wanted to investigate because he didn't believe that the heart of an eagle and the brain of an eagle could become a chicken. So he went out to the chicken farmer and he said, I would like to experiment on your chicken. And the farmer said, well, I can tell you right now, he thinks he's a chicken. There is no question about it. He is a chicken. Let me try. Okay, so he picked the eagle up and he sat the eagle on the top of the fence and he said, Eagle, you are an eagle. Spread your wings and fly. And the eagle looked at him, looked at his friends, the chickens, hopped off the fence and went back to being a chicken. Well, the farmer said, I told you so. It's okay. The farmer said, I told you so. He thinks he's a chicken. The naturalist said, well, let me try one more experiment. Okay, so the next day, he climbed up and he took the eagle and he put the eagle on the awning over the house. And he said, Eagle, you are an eagle. Strengthen those wings and fly. And the eagle looked at him, looked at the chickens, hopped off the roof and went back to being a chicken. And the farmer said, I told you so. He thinks he's a chicken. The naturalist said, well, let me try one more thing. And so the next day, they got the eagle and the farmer and the naturalist, and they got in the car, and they drove to a kind of a high mountain that's far away so you couldn't see the house or anything, got the eagle out, sat him on the ledge, and he looked at him and he said, you are an eagle. You better just spread those wings and fly. And oh, the day was beautiful. It was a beautiful sunny day, the blue sky, the clouds were puffy. And the eagle looked at him. And the eagle looked up in the sky. And the eagle sort of did this. And then he sort of did this. And then he sort of did this. And he took off and he soared in the sky. Now, my question for you is, are you a chicken or are you an eagle? Now, personally, I'm a chicken. Okay, I don't take risks. I don't want to soar. I prefer to be down on the ground, scratching on the ground. But what does God want us to be? He wants us to be an eagle. He wants us to soar for him in everything we do. He doesn't want us to be a chicken or a pew sitter. He wants us to get out and make friends and be an eagle. Well, whenever I think I'm going to be a chicken and I don't want to do something that somebody asked me to do, I have to think about Psalms 23. Now, most of you probably know that, but it means more to me than what it says. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That means to me that he will give me everything I need to soar. I don't have to be afraid I can't do something, because even if I'm afraid, I'm going to be afraid and do it, because that's what God asked me to do. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. That means he's in front of me. He not only asks me to soar, he flies in front of me. He is there to guide me so I don't make mistakes. And if I do, he says, that's okay, Margaret. Yeah, that's okay. Just go on. Go do your thing. His rod and his staff, they comfort me. Now, the shepherd uses his staff to take care of the animals that might attack me from the rear. That means God is behind me. He's in front of me. He's in behind me to protect me. It says his staff and his rod, they comfort me. The shepherd uses the staff to take the sheep, if they're hurt or stuck in briars or something, to gently pull them out. That means he's by my side. And then it says he covers the head with oil. Now the shepherd uses that oil to mend, to soothe, to comfort. That means he's on top of me. That means God is behind me, in front of me, over me, and beside me. How can I not soar? How can we say, God, I'm not good enough, when he promises he's going to be everywhere with us? You know, but what about the obstacles? You know, what about the stuff that Satan puts in our place? Well, there was a little boy by the name of Glenn, and Glenn lived in West Virginia in a little tiny, smaller than Laytonville. Okay, for those of you who know Laytonville, you understand. Okay, just this tiny little hole-in-the-wall place. And there was a one-room school, and every kid in the school had a job. And Glenn's job was to go early, because he lived really close, and start the stove going so this room would be warm when the kids got there. Well, one particular day, the teacher got there, and she noticed the school was on fire. She ran in, and she saw Glenn, and he was lying on the ground, almost unconscious, with the bottom half of his body badly burned. They rushed him to the county hospital, and Glenn was not unconscious, and he heard everything. And the doctor was talking to Glenn's parents, and he said, you know, I don't think he's going to make it, but it'll be a blessing if he doesn't make it, if he dies. He's going to be paralyzed. He's going to be worthless. So let's just pray that God lets him die. Glenn was laying in the ICU, and he said, I am not going to die. And he just kept saying, I'm not going to die, no matter how bad the pain was, no matter how much it hurt. He was not going to die. He got out of ICU, went down to the med-surg floor, and the doctor was talking to the parents again, and he said, gosh, I'm so sorry he lived. He's just going to be a miserable life. His legs are worthless. He is going to either lie in bed or be in a wheelchair all of his life. Glenn heard it. He said, I will walk again. And so when he got home from the hospital, every day his mom massaged his legs, worthless legs. They were just flopping. They were just horrible. And nothing was happening. And Glenn kept saying, I will walk again. And when the weather got warm, Mom would take him out in his wheelchair and would let him, just get the sunshine and everything. Well, one day he said, enough of this, and he literally threw himself out of the wheelchair onto the ground. And he looked around and he said, I'm going to get to that fence. Now picture this. He has worthless legs from the waist down. He literally clawed his way across to the fence, and he managed to get himself up. And so he could stand there holding onto the fence. He did that for several days, and then he thought, wonder if I can take a step. So he took his hands and he pushed his body over, and he took a step. And then he said, well, if I can do one, I can do two. And pretty soon he was walking all the way around the yard holding onto that fence. And then he said, I bet I can walk without holding on. And he wore a path around his house. And when school started, he walked to school. And then he ran to school. Then he went to college. He was on the track team. And for his age and time, he became the fastest man in the world. You know, so think about this. Think about this. When Satan puts an obstacle in our place or a bad time in our place, what do? Do we quit? Do we say, Do we get mad at God? Do we blame God? You know? Do we say, well, God, if you love me, you would? Or do we say, devil, you're not going to get me. God is behind me, he's in front of me, he's over me, he's side of me. I will do better. I can conquer this. And we need to remember that, because all of the time, God puts obstacles in our way. And there's a song that I really love, that sometimes it takes a mountain. So, the woman we're going to meet today saw her best friend killed, saw a man murdered, was in jail for 2 years, and she never, ever gave up her trust in the Lord and knew that God had a plan for her life. So if you're ready to suspend belief and go back in time, we'll meet this woman of trust. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Sabbath. I understand you've been talking about obstacles and trusting in God and knowing that he will take care of you and support you, and you need to soar with him. Is that right? Yeah. Well, I need to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Junia. Remember, I was here before, but I was here when I used my Hebrew name, Joanna. And Junia, it means the lesser, and that's my Roman name. And I want to tell you about my life after Joanna and after Jesus. Well, I was one of the followers of Jesus, and I helped to support his ministry with money. I am married to a man named, gotta get it, and he is the king's treasurer and the king's butler. And if you know anything about the White House, you know that the chief usher is in charge of everything. Well, that was Cuz's job. And so because of that, I had a little more respect than most women of my time. So I was able to follow Jesus. I was able to, I don't know if I want to use the word able. I was at the bottom of Calvary when Jesus died on the cross. I was one of the first women who was at the tomb when Jesus rose. So I love him so much. And it hurt so bad. But then when he arose, that was the best thing for me. That was just the most amazing miracle. Well, after he rose in 40 days, he told his disciples, I want you to go up to the Mount of Olives, and I want to talk to you. And so the disciples went up, and Jesus said, I've got to go home. I've got to see my Father. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to send to you a special Holy Spirit. And he's going to be there to take care of you, to guide you, to protect you. And so don't worry. But what I want you to do is I want you to go back into Jerusalem, go back to the upper room, and wait. So Mary and Jesus' brothers and all the disciples went back, and they waited. And they prayed, and they made sure there was nothing wrong with each other. They made sure that they were all united in their love of the Lord. And on Pentecost, this huge wind just came through, and it was like this most amazing thing. And they looked around, and every person there had a tongue of fire over their head. And that was the Holy Spirit. Well, they began to preach. And the church leaders did not like that they began to preach. And so they hired people to persecute them. And they hired people to put them in jail. And there was one young man who was not afraid. And he began to preach, even though he knew that something bad was going to happen to him. And one day the church leader said, stone him, stone him, stone him, kill him, stone him. And they grabbed him, and they took him out of town, and they began to throw these massive stones on him. And the young man named Stephen knelt down, looked at the sky and said, Father, please, please forgive them their sin. And he laid down and he died. And he went to sleep in Jesus. Well, there was another young man there whose job was to watch the coats, to make sure that nobody stole any coats. And so when the whole stoning was over and Stephen had died, he was going to Damascus to persecute more people. And so he was walking along the road, and this bright light came to him, and it blinded him. And he didn't know what to do. He didn't know why that happened. And a voice said, Saul, I want you to go to Damascus, find where you were going to stay, and wait. So he did that, and he waited for 3 days. And a godly man came to him and told him the story of Jesus, told him the love, told him about grace and about just how much Jesus loved him. And Saul realized that he had been totally wrong in what he had done. And he asked for forgiveness, and the blindness was taken away from him, and his name was changed to Paul. Well, Paul and I and other apostles decided that we were going to go to every region in Rome. And so we went to all 4 regions of Rome to preach the gospel. And it was during this 10 years that Paul wrote most of the New Testament: Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Corinthians. All of those books were written because we would start a church, and then we would move on to start another church. But we wanted to make sure they were still okay. And so he would write letters to them to encourage them, say things that might be going wrong, to how to fix it, that kind of thing. And when we went to another town, we did not ever accept any money. Paul, who was an excellent tent maker, would set up business and he would fix tents, and we would work whatever jobs we could find in the town, and then we would preach. Well, we really wanted to go to Spain because we felt that we needed to spread out even more. Now, there were two ways to get to Spain. One was to go the short way. The other was to go through Jerusalem and then go to Spain. Well, we talked about it, and we said, let's go to Jerusalem. We haven't been for a while, and we need to, talk to the leaders, and they'll be happy to see us. So we walked, and when we got to Rome, it was not what we expected. Now, Team Rome, Team Paul, they were absolutely glad to see us. They were absolutely happy. They were overjoyed. Church leaders, I'll call them the Team Church, they were not happy to see us. And some of the apostles said, well, Paul, why don't you have a purification ceremony, and that will let them know you don't need to destroy their power or anything. And Paul didn't want to do it. He said, no, it doesn't feel right with me. But they convinced him, and he did it. Well, things went from bad to worse. There was a major riot between the two teams. And had a Roman soldier not stepped in, I truly believe they would have ripped Paul from limb to limb. They were that angry. There were trials, and more trials, and more trials. We were put in prison. We stayed in prison for 2 years. And I got to tell you, just picture in your mind, the prison cells were below the surface. So all of the water and all of the sewage and everything would drip down, so the walls would be running with water. There was mold all over. It was smelly. It was damp. And the food barely kept us alive. And the men had it bad, but we women had it worse because we were slaves, and we had to do anything that the jailers told us to do. Paul was amazing. He never complained. He never said a word against God. We sang together, we prayed together, we quoted scriptures together, and we held it together through Paul and with God's help. Paul realized we were going to die if we didn't get out of there. And we knew we were not going to get out of there on our own. So Paul had a card with him. He's going to play his card, and he was a Roman citizen. And he went to the jailer and he said, I'm a Roman citizen. I haven't said that before, but here's my credentials. And I need to go to Rome. I want the Roman soldiers. I want Roman soldiers to protect us, and I want to go to Rome, and I want to be tried in Rome. Well, the jailer couldn't refuse because he was a Roman citizen. So they handcuffed us, and they walked us to Rome. And we got there and didn't know what to expect, did not know what to expect. They put us under house arrest. And for the next 2 years, we were able to have visitors, and Paul was able to write more letters. He was able to shepherd some of the young men who came to visit. It was an amazing experience how God turned the worst time in our life to one of the best times in our life. And I learned so many things from Paul, but one thing I learned is that there is no male nor female under Christ. We are all equal under Christ. We all are loved by Christ. There is no difference. And I felt accepted for the first time because there were times when I felt like I had been forgotten, but not according to Paul. And the other thing I learned is to trust in God no matter what's happening. He saw us through miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of walking and being in prison, and he never forgot us or left us. David worked at Stanford Hospital, by Stanford University, in Children's Hospital. And there was a young girl whose name was Livy. And Livy was very sick, and they assumed that Livy was going to die if they couldn't find blood that matched hers. And they tested so many people, and the only blood that matched hers was her little 5-year-old brother, who had had the same disease and had been healed, so he had the antibodies that she needed. And so the doctor went up to the 5-year-old and said, do you mind giving your blood to save your sister's life? And he thought for a minute, and he said, no, if it's going to save her life, I'll give my blood. So they made the arrangements and put the beds side by side so they could transfer the blood into Livy. And the doctor came in and said, well, how's it going? And the little boy looked kind of sad, and he said, am I going to die? Is it going to hurt very much? When am I going to die? You see, he was only 5 years old, and he didn't realize. He thought he was giving his life to let his sister live. And think about what Jesus did for us. Think about the fact that he died for everyone in this room. But not only that, he died if only one of you in this room, he would have died. He would have died for me, by myself, if I was the only one that had sinned. Think of the love that God has for us, that he will die for us and give his life to save us. That's all we need to know, is live a life as an eagle and soar for him. How can we not, when he gave his life for us? So my challenge for you this week is to every morning when you get up, say, God, I want to fly and I want to soar like an eagle for you. Give me the strength, give me the courage, and send me where you want me to go. Send someone I need to talk to, but I'm willing to do it even if I'm afraid, because you died for me, you love me, you're coming back for me, and I'm going to be an eagle, and I'm going to soar. Let's pray. As we face this coming week, help us to soar like eagles. Help us to understand that no matter what happens this week, Jesus, the Good Shepherd, will lead, protect, comfort, and guide us. Please give us a sense of your power and strength and your willingness to be with us every day. Now, as we leave your house, bless us each, Lord. Amen.